Young Santa's Silly Christmas Capers, authored by Doretha. In a twinkling little village nestled between snowy mountains, a boy named Kris Kringle was born to the happiest, jolliest family in the north. Everyone knew this rosy-cheeked child was special, but no one knew just how much magic and mischief he'd bring. This is the story of young Santa's very first Christmas adventures. The great gingerbread mix-up it all began one frosty morning in the Kringle family kitchen, which smelled of sugar and cinnamon. Little Nick had sneaked a handful of candy canes from the pantry and was attempting to dip them in cookie dough. He'd seen his mom, Mrs. Kringle, mixing something in a big wooden bowl, and he was sure he could help. But Nick was barely tall enough to see over the counter, so he climbed up on a stack of flour bags. His excitement was boundless, and his aim, not so much. With one big scoop of flour, he sent a cloud of it everywhere, coating the entire kitchen, including his mom's fresh batch of gingerbread men. They popped out of the oven, looking ghostly white and surprisingly less tasty.
Oh, Nick,
Mrs. Kringle chuckled.
how did you manage to make my gingerbread men look like snowmen?
Nick just grinned, holding up his sticky candy cane-dipped hands.
Maybe they needed more candy, Mama.
And that's how the very first gingerbread snowmen came to be. The reindeer ride one chilly afternoon. Nick was playing with his best friends, a mischievous group of tiny reindeer calves led by a curious, big-eyed reindeer named Rudy. They loved to chase each other around the barn, but Nick had a brilliant idea. Maybe they could fly. He found an old sled, tied it with ribbons he borrowed from the gift-wrapping station, and tried to tie Rudy to the front.
Come on, Rudy. All you gotta do is run really fast, and we'll take off.
The little reindeer blinked at him, twitching his tiny, still ungrown antlers. With a triumphant shout, Nick yelled,
To the skies.
and gave a gentle nudge to Rudy. What happened next? A whole lot of zooming around the barn as Rudy dashed around in circles, dragging a very dizzy Nick. Nick spun and laughed so hard his cheeks turned as red as cranberries. The little sled never left the ground, but he swore they almost flew. When Papa Kringle found them, all tangled up in ribbon and hay, he just laughed and said,
Maybe next year, son.
Nick hugged Rudy, promising.
One day, we'll be flying over the whole North Pole.
The candy cane countdown as Christmas grew closer. Nick's excitement bubbled over. He'd heard there was a new countdown to Christmas clock in town square, and he couldn't wait to see it. But Nick wanted to bring a little extra excitement to the countdown. So he filled his pockets with red and white candy canes from his mom's stash and decided to decorate the clock himself. With a bit of sneaky climbing and a lot of giggles, he stuck candy canes all around the big wooden numbers on the clock. As the villagers gathered to count down the days, they couldn't help but laugh when they saw the clock had transformed into a candy cane striped display.
Look at that.
They cheered,
We're counting down with candy.
and Nick, grinning from behind a snowbank, felt proud to have added some extra sweetness to the season. The toymaker surprised Nick loved visiting the North Pole's toymaker, a kind, clever old elf named Sparkle. One afternoon, Sparkle gave Nick a small wooden mallet and showed him how to shape toy blocks. But before long, Nick's attention drifted to a bright box of leftover springs and squeaky parts.
What if
Nick said with a mischievous twinkle in his eye.
we made a surprise toy that jumps out and squeaks when you open it?
The idea was too fun to resist, so Nick and Sparkle got to work. With a lot of glue, some giggles, and a few extra squeaks, they created their very first jumping jack-in-the-box. But Nick couldn't stop at just one. He hid them all over Sparkle's workshop, so that when any elf opened a drawer or reached for a tool, a toy would pop up with a cheerful squeak. When the elves discovered Nick's prank, the workshop filled with laughter, and Sparkle even gave Nick his very own toymaker badge.
One day, you'll be making toys for all the children.
Sparkle said with a wink. The night of sparkling snowflakes on Christmas Eve, the Kringle family was bustling with holiday cheer, and Nick had one last idea up his sleeve. He wanted to make the night sky look even more magical. So he snuck outside with a sack of glitter he had, well, borrowed from his mom's crafting station. He climbed up a snowbank and flung the glitter into the sky, trying to make the stars sparkle extra. What he didn't expect was a gust of wind that blew all that glitter right back down onto him. By the time Mrs. Kringle called him in for dinner, young Nick looked like a living, twinkling Christmas ornament.
Oh my,
She gasped, trying not to laugh.
looks like our little Nick is as sparkly as the night sky itself.
As he stood there, glittering in the moonlight with snowflakes falling around him, Mrs. Kringle had a feeling that her little mischief maker might just grow up to spread magic to the world in the most wonderful ways. And that's how, with flour, ribbons, and a bag of glitter, little Nick Kringle showed the North Pole, and eventually the whole world, that Christmas magic can be found in the funniest and most unexpected places.